What would you do if the very person you thought was weak turned out to be stronger than your darkest nightmare? In the middle of a chaotic high school science lab, a young bully towers over his teacher. His hands, rough, shaking with reckless anger, wrap around her throat. Students gasp, some scream, and phones rise into the air to record the madness. He thinks he's in control. He thinks she's powerless. But what he doesn't know is that this teacher has faced battlefields far more terrifying than this classroom. And in just a few seconds, his entire future will shatter, because her past is nothing like he ever imagined. Stay till the end, because this is not just a story about a bully and his teacher. It's a story about discipline, courage, and the kind of strength that doesn't come from fists, but from surviving wars you never see. The bell had just rung, echoing down the crowded hallway of Ridgeview High. Students poured into classrooms laughing, whispering, carrying backpacks too heavy for their frames. The chemistry lab smelled faintly of chalk, ethanol, and burnt wires from experiments gone wrong the week before. At the front stood Ms. Elena Ward, the kind of teacher students underestimated. She wasn't tall, her voice was calm, and her presence seemed quiet. She always wore her hair neatly tied back, her blazer pressed, her shoes polished but simple. To many she was just a science teacher. But behind her calm brown eyes lived a world no student could imagine. Among the students slouched Darren Cole, the notorious bully of Ridgeview. 17 years old, built like a football player, and feared by most. His father's absence and his mother's endless double shifts had left him bitter, angry, and hungry for control. Control he found in terrorizing weaker kids and even teachers. That morning Darren was in no mood to listen. While Alina patiently explained the rules of handling acid in the lab, he smirked, tossing a glass beaker from hand to hand. The class grew tense. Everyone knew Darren loved to test boundaries. "Darren, please put that down before someone gets hurt," Alina said firmly, her tone steady. He laughed, his voice sharp. "What are you gonna do, Ms. Ward? Call my mommy?" The class chuckled nervously. Some wanted to look away, others stared, waiting for the storm. Alina didn't flinch. "This isn't a joke. Sit down." But Darren wasn't used to someone holding eye contact with him like that. Something in her stillness, her complete lack of fear, triggered his rage. In one reckless motion, he slammed the beaker onto the desk, shards scattering. Then, before anyone could stop him, he lunged forward, his hand gripping her throat. The classroom erupted in screams. A girl dropped her phone, another whispered frantically, "He's actually choking her." But Alina's eyes didn't widen, they narrowed. A different kind of fire lit inside her. Not panic, not fear. Something Darren had never seen before. Because this was not the first time someone had tried to choke her. And unlike Darren, she had been trained for moments like this. In a blur so fast the students barely caught it, Alina shifted her weight, twisted her body, and broke free from his grip. His wrist was suddenly bent backward at an unnatural angle, his knees buckling under the pain. With one precise move, she had him face down on the lab table, his arm locked behind him. Gasps filled the room. What just happened?" one boy whispered. Alina leaned down, her voice calm but cutting through the chaos like steel. Lesson number 1, Darren. Never mistake silence for weakness. Security rushed in moments later, pulling Darren away. He was cursing, thrashing, but his eyes, those eyes that once brimmed with arrogance, were filled with something new, fear. The students stared at their teacher, no longer seeing Ms. Ward, the science nerd. They saw someone entirely different. Someone they didn't fully understand. And none of them knew that this day was only the beginning. The incident spread like wildfire. By lunch, every student had heard how Ms. Ward took down Darren like a soldier. Some said she was an ex-cop. Others whispered she was CIA. Rumors twisted, but the truth was stranger than fiction. Darren, however, wasn't laughing. His suspension was instant, but he didn't care. He had a reputation to protect. "Nobody makes a fool out of me," he snarled to his gang of friends. He swore he'd get revenge. But what Darren didn't realize was that Alina's life story had already prepared her for people like him. That evening, as Alina sat alone grading papers, Principal Matthews entered. "Alina, the way you handled today, it wasn't normal." Alina sighed, placing her pen down. She had lived quietly for years, blending in, hiding her past, but now the mask was slipping. "I served," she finally admitted. 15 years, U.S. Army, military police, overseas tours, hostage negotiations, combat zones you wouldn't believe. "I didn't come here to fight anymore. I came here to teach. To give these kids a future I almost lost. And the principal was speechless, and in that silence, Elena felt the old ghosts of war pressing on her chest. She had buried those years, but sometimes the past refused to stay buried. Meanwhile, Darren plotted. One night, he and his friends cornered Elena in the parking lot. Phones out, cameras ready. This was his moment to humiliate her, to take back control. "Think you're tough, huh?" he sneered. "This ain't your army, lady. This is my school." Elena stepped forward, unafraid. Her voice was steady. "Darren, you're walking down a path you won't return from. I've seen boys like you. Angry, lost. They think violence makes them strong, but it destroys them." Her words sliced deeper than any punch. But Darren laughed it off, shoving forward. His friends egged him on. And that's when Elena showed them, not brutality, but discipline. In a sequence of controlled, defensive moves, she disarmed Darren's knife, dropped his friend to the ground, and pinned Darren against the wall before anyone could blink. This time no one recorded. They were too stunned. Her voice was low, commanding, almost trembling with unspoken memories. "I've fought in wars, Darren. I've seen young men destroy their futures because they thought pain made them powerful. I will not let you ruin yours." Police sirens echoed. Darren's fate was sealed. Expelled, arrested, and facing charges, his arrogance had finally destroyed him. But Elena, she didn't smile at her victory. She only closed her eyes, remembering the soldiers she couldn't save, the boys who never came home. The students who once saw her as just a teacher, now looked at her with respect that words couldn't measure. For the first time, Darren's gang stayed quiet in class. For the first time, fear gave way to admiration. And for the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe that her scars, her past, had a purpose, not to haunt her, but to guide the next generation away from darkness. And so, the bully who thought he held power learned the hardest lesson of all: true strength isn't found in fists or fear or control. It's found in discipline, resilience, and the courage to rise above anger. Elena's past had destroyed Darren's future, but more importantly, it saved countless others. Because sometimes, the quietest teacher in the room carries the loudest story.